Good morning. Welcome to today's Northland Diversity and Aging Series event. Please go ahead and use the chat feature. Introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know who's here today. Introduce yourself with your name and your organization or any other affiliation you might have. Just a reminder, this is a Zoom webinar, not a regular Zoom meeting. So your attendees, you don't have the ability to share your screens or use your audio. So please continue to use the chat feature throughout the event. And for any questions you may have, please use the Q&A feature. But also note that the second hour, we will have a panel discussion, and all of our panelists will be a part of that panel discussion. So if you put a question in the chat and it doesn't get answered right, or not the chat, sorry, in the Q&A function, if it doesn't get answered right away, it might be because we are hoping to have that answered during our panel discussion. So please be patient with us there. Okay, let's get started. So welcome again to today's event. My name is Mimi Stender. I am with Duluth Aging Support, one of the organizations that came together in 2021 to create the Northland Diversity and Aging Series. The Northland Diversity and Aging Series is a collaboration of the College of St. Scholastica's Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion and the Gerontology Program, the Northland Foundation, the Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging, and of course, Duluth Aging Support. I'd really like to thank our series partners for their wisdom and commitment to make each of these events in the series successful and hopefully valuable to all of you who are attending. I'd really like to make a special call of gratitude out to our wonderful moderator, Georgia Lay, with the Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging. Georgia will be introduced a little bit later. I'd like to thank my coordinating partner for this event, who does so much of the work, Rebecca also, and our tech expert, Eric Mystery. We have three fantastic ASL interpreters today. Thank you so much, Janae, Audra, and Riley. Today's Northland Diversity and Aging Series event is focused on people living with disabilities and creating person-centered approaches to care. We have a tremendous lineup of presentations today that will shed light on understanding the disability experience with an emphasis on older adult experiences, the many types of disabilities, and the challenges and solutions from an assistive technology and occupational therapy perspective. And we'll also learn about living with disabilities in a rural community, which has its own unique challenges and support solutions. So we're very grateful to our presenters today. We have a fantastic team from the Lighthouse Center for Vital Living, Mary Junila, Sherry Cook, Laura Lucier, and also we have Julie Wilson, Executive Director of Care Partners of Cook County. So now I would like to introduce my coordinating colleague, Rebecca also. Rebecca is an outreach specialist for Duluth Aging Support, focusing on outreach, education, and program development. She's also the owner of Wise Roots Wellbeing, where she offers Qigong classes and holistic health and wellness support for individuals and groups. Rebecca, I'll turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I also want to say thank you so much for joining us for this important event today. Thank you, Mimi, for the introduction. And just like Mimi said, you can see that there is a chat feature at the bottom of your screen, and we welcome you to use that feature throughout this event. Any questions can go in the Q&A. We'll be using the chat to share information and resources during the presentations. And so feel free to check those out during this webinar. Also, after the webinar, we will send you a post-event email that will include a link to the webinar recording, any follow-up resources, and potentially even any answers to questions that we don't get to during the presentations or panelist discussion. Next, I would like to share our land acknowledgement for the Northland Diversity and Aging series. The Northland Diversity and Aging series team recognizes the land we currently live and work on originally was and continues to be the homelands of Indigenous people. We currently enjoy access to this land because the land was ceded in a nation-to-nation treaty process between the Anishinaabe and the United States government. By recognizing Indigenous homelands, we accept our shared history and we make a commitment to shape our ongoing relationships with justice and reconciliation as our guiding values. Next, I would love to introduce our amazing moderator for this event. I'd like to welcome Georgia Lane. Georgia is an aging services planner for the Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging, currently focusing on age-friendly community work. She has 15 years of experience working on program planning and development in aging services. And today's topic is near to her heart, as she also has the privilege of serving as a caregiver and legal guardian of her amazing brother-in-law who lives a full life with an intellectual disability. Welcome, Georgia. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you. Can you hear me now? Sorry about that. All right, let's try this again. Thank you, Rebecca. And thank you to Mimi for your kickoff for this meeting. Very excited to be here today with this esteemed panel of professionals who are working day to day in disability services and in aging. And this is such an important topic. We don't give enough time and attention to thinking about the overlap between aging and disability services. So really able to spend some time today thinking on a local level how they intersect. So we have a really exciting agenda here. We are going to hear from Mary Junela, Sherry Cook, and Laura with Lighthouse Center for Vital Living, followed up by Julie Wilson from Care Partners of Cook County. And then I'm really excited for our panel discussion. We really hope that this is, as folks are talking, please make notes, write down your questions and enter them into the Q&A. We really hope to have a lively discussion where we feel like we're all sitting around a table together and able to talk more about the issues. And so then we will end with our closing remarks. And so with that, I am going to pass it over to Mary Junela. Mary is the Executive Director of the Lighthouse Center for Vital Living, an organization formerly known as Duluth Lighthouse for the Blind. As a native of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, Mary also lived and worked in Cook County, where she was a business owner, executive director of the Economic Development Authority, and founding director of the Cook County Higher Education Project. Mary has 2 team members joining her today, and Mary will introduce them, but we would like to express our gratitude to you, Mary, and the Lighthouse Center for Vital Living team members who will also present today, Sherry Cook and Laura Lusher. Thank you, Mary, for joining us.
Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you all for being here. It was fun to see everybody log in. I see some names I recognize and many names that I don't. So hello to all of you. So today, as you know, we're here to talk about diversity and aging, and I'm here with my colleagues, Sherry Cook and Laura Lusher, both wonderful professionals. I want to give plenty of time for them because they are the people who are out in the field and doing this wonderful work. But I do appreciate the chance to share some introductory remarks and to kind of set the stage with some thoughts. Oh, let's see, why is it not advancing? Carol, enter. I'm sorry. Okay, there we go. So we're talking about disability and aging, and what I want to talk about and focus on is why this is so important to understand. I don't think it's an issue that is very well understood, and what it takes to respond effectively to that. I want to start by letting you know that the issue of diversity is very personal for me. I am the mother of 2 adult sons, one of whom is pictured here. His name is Eric. He has cerebral palsy, and here he is using an augmentative communication device. He was actually, to our knowledge, the first person in the Northland to get this put through Blue Cross Blue Shield, and very early adopter in this, and it is truly his language. I'm also the mother of an adult son who is a person of color, and I am the former foster mother of a teen who is Native American. And I have a strong family history of blindness. Both of my parents, 2 grandparents, and a great-grandfather became blind or legally blind throughout their life. So it is from those perspectives that I am speaking, and you will hear me come back to talk about some of this. I hope that's okay. I'm speaking as both a professional and a person who has experienced many different aspects of diversity. And I guess one thing that I want to say about that, understanding diversity, is that part of understanding any diversity issue is understanding what it means to be othered. And that sense of not being heard, not fully respected, not understood is something that we talk about with diversity. I don't know if we always talk about it a lot in terms of disability, but it is very much present. And I would also say it's very much present for caregivers. Having lived that life and been a very intensive caregiver, I can speak to that at a very personal level as well. So disability, I believe, is a still very poorly understood dimension of diversity. And of course, as so many elements of diversity are. But I want to go through some facts that you may or may not know. If they are facts that I still think it's great to get them out in front of us as some perspective of the issues that we're dealing with here. So first of all, disability is very common. Not something that I think is well known. The CDC says it affects 1 in 4 Americans and 2 in 5 older adults. The same CDC data for Minnesota is that it affects 20% of Minnesotans of all age. Now we will talk about other data. I'm not going to go deep into these numbers, but one thing I will say is that there are different definitions of disability, and so you're going to see some different numbers. Now I'm switching over to using data from the Minnesota Compass, and you'll notice that it says Minnesotans of all ages with a disability is 11%. That's a lot lower than the 20% that we just mentioned from the CDC. A lot of that just has to do with definition and how the data is collected, if it's self-report and what they're asking people to report. But I think the numbers still tell a powerful story. So, and one of those stories is that disability is growing across the population due to many factors. One of them, a very strong factor, is that the population is aging. And again, looking at those numbers, Minnesotans of all ages with a disability at 11.5%, older adults at nearly 30%, and older adults 85 plus 64%. So clearly, as people age, a lot of people are aging into disability. Laura's going to talk a little bit more about what that means. But I also want to be clear that there is also the growth of certain conditions across all ages, for instance, diabetes, obesity, certain developmental disabilities like autism, mental health issues, addiction, and now there's a lot of talk about what long COVID may mean for the disability community and the incidence of disability for years to come. So there is growing disability across the ages as well. And I inserted here at the bottom a quote that jumped out at me. Much is made of the growing number of older adults. We talk about the silver tsunami, especially in the Northland. That's a huge issue. We are the oldest region in the state, some of our counties in particular. So this is not a small statement when this researcher says, but this will be accompanied by an even sharper increase in the number of people with disabilities. So to understand aging, we need to understand and embrace serving people with disabilities. It doesn't mean that all older adults have disabilities, but it does mean that this is a big part of our landscape. Disability also intersects very significantly with other risk factors. And I feel like this is something that is also not discussed often enough. And that includes race and poverty. For instance, again, that 11% figure for all Minnesotans with disabilities. But if you look at American Indians was the terminology used here in this research, that figure is 17%, so much, much higher. Here's something that I don't know if everybody knows or talks about, the intersection between disabilities and poverty, okay? People with disabilities live in poverty at twice the rate of people without disabilities. And people with disabilities account for more than half of those who live in long-term poverty. We talk about poverty, we talk about disability, we don't often enough talk about them together. Disability rates are also higher in the Northland than statewide. Again, back to that 11.5% is the base. Northlanders with disability is at 15.3%. And again, these rates could be higher if we're looking at other definitions of disability. I think you all know this, but again, it bears repeating. There are many, many, many different types of disability, and many of them are invisible. There are physical, there's pictures up here depicting, physical disability, cognitive, mental health issues, hearing loss, vision loss, addiction is another area that is more and more common across all ages. Dementia, depression, learning disabilities, attention deficit. The woman on the right is meant to depict invisible disabilities. There's no obvious sign that this woman has a disability. By some counts, invisible disabilities count for 80% of people with disabilities. So despite having made tremendous progress in the disability field, and tremendous gratitude as a mother of somebody with very significant disabilities for this progress, for the life that he is able to live today. Despite those progress, there continue to be very real barriers for people of all ages with disabilities. And I pulled up these two pictures because they show both of them show how we've made progress creating access, right? We've got marked trails. For the photo on the left, we have marked sidewalks and audible street crossings for somebody who's blind. Wonderful progress, and yet we have snow dumped right in front of the sidewalk. That how is this person supposed to cross that safely or even know that it's there? On the right-hand side, this is another picture of my son. And this is a real photo. I took this picture because it was a very frustrating experience. We headed out on a very nice Sunday afternoon in the fall to take a walk. We got out of the car, we came to the access to the trail, and there literally was not a safe way for me in his power wheelchair to navigate beyond this closed, locked gate. And I just thought that was such a powerful metaphor because, we have beautiful trails, we've made so much progress, but the awareness that a power wheelchair, with maybe this much clearance on the bottom, can't go around and get on this trail in a safe way. And I did decide that I just wasn't going to risk doing it. You can't see all the obstacles here that are at the edge, but I ended up having to, we got back in the car and we did find access to the trail in another place, but it just struck me as such a powerful metaphor for progress and yet barriers. So let's talk about what some of those other barriers are, the metaphorical barriers. You know, physical accessibility we've talked about, and physical accessibility involves not just building the access, but keeping it open, right? Understanding what it needs to do that. There's also barriers, you know, and again, I know you all know this, public attitudes and lack of awareness of possibilities. I feel that is really huge. I think that we as a society have profoundly low expectations for people with disabilities in general, of all ages. We see disability and we think the word literally means can't, not that we can do things differently. And along with that goes self-doubts and, oops, didn't mean to do that. Denial that you have disability, because who wants to admit that you can't, if that's really what it means, right? So a lot of people are reluctant to ask for help, especially if they don't know that there's real help there. I would also say that the lack of the real expertise to help, and as I'll talk about, the Lighthouse has made it our mission literally to expand and help these issues, because we know that there is the need for expertise out there. Another issue, and we talked about poverty, the low employment rates and low income of people of all ages with disabilities. For instance, how many of you know that despite ADA, and we're now coming up on 30 years, the wonderful accomplishments, the doors that have been open, we are no further along in terms of employment rates for people with disabilities than we were prior to ADA. In fact, there is good evidence that we moved backwards, especially for certain age groups. And I include that in I can include those sources for anybody who's interested. So the intersection of poverty and additionally with race, and then I would say the tendency to oversimplify approaches. And this is a message that we really try to get out. Sherry will talk more about it. Laura will talk more about it. We don't just hand out devices and say, you know, hey, this will help you, and walk away. Technology is hugely powerful, but there's also a lot of device abandonment in the field. There's money being spent that doesn't go to the purposes that it should, and not really understanding the depth of what is needed. And again, I warned you I'd talk a little bit about personal issues. My son, who is an augmentative communication user, it took years of work and programming work on our part and modeling for this to become his voice. And if we had not done that, he would not have that. That's not the case for all adaptations and all disabilities, but it is, I think it's just a reminder that I keep in the back of my head in my role as executive director at the Lighthouse, that we really have a responsibility to look at issues deeply and to serve the total needs and to help people along that whole journey as we go. In the Northland, we also have some additional barriers that are outsized, I guess, with the compared to the rest of the state. The fact that we have an older population, and the fact that we have even more severe labor force shortages, especially in some counties, means that our systems are already hugely strained. So you take what I just talked about with the need for nuanced approaches and understanding and time, and then you think about what systems we have to respond. For instance, I do feel that assisted living facilities are often not well equipped to serve people with disabilities. They are severely, they have severe staff shortages, and the orientation is very much around basic personal care, medication. But for instance, you know, Sherry mentioned a client that we've worked with to get augmentative communication device going, and the staff want to help, but it does take time and it's not something. So, you know, we are sending people into facilities for help without maybe providing the resources and the orientation as a society that means that these people are going to get the assistance that they need. We have lower income in our region, rural issues, the distance from services, and transportation difficulties compound all of these barriers. So the Lighthouse, we have literally made it our mission to try to address these issues on a broader level. We are formally the Duluth Lighthouse for the Blind. Serving individuals with vision loss remains a very core part of what we do. But we started out by expanding our mission to bring in other sources of funding, to be able to build medical insurance and added occupational therapy, because there are so many adults with vision loss and not enough state resources to serve them. So by bringing in medical insurance funding and grant funding, we were able to expand that. Then we got to the point where, gosh, we have these wonderful occupational therapists on staff. And we know that people often have more than one disability. It doesn't make sense to send Laura up to Ely to serve somebody who has vision loss, but they may also have balance issues or mental health issues or need home adaptations that she is trained to deliver. You know, we wanted to be able to serve people across disability areas. And then we were able to add Sherry Cook, who's very well known in this region for her expertise in assistive technology. And we became, at that point, we officially expanded our mission and renamed. So we've added assistive technology as a division, and we've added occupational therapy as a division. And both of these can be offered in-home, remotely, or in our center. Our primary service area is the Arrowhead in Northwest Wisconsin, but we do, for some of our programs, even go statewide or across northern Minnesota. So what is needed? I guess I just want to leave you, I'm going to hand it off to my colleagues, but I want to leave you with a couple of thoughts. One is the idea is that we need to, in a really profound way, embrace the idea that disability is not a failure. Disability and dependence are often stigmatized and viewed as antithetical to successful aging. We talk about aging in place, we talk about independence. And yes, of course, most people want independence, and many people will age with total independence, including older adults with disabilities. And the Lighthouse does work to empower that. And yet, for many older adults and people with disabilities, the best solutions may be a combination of independence, accommodation, adaptation, and some amount of dependence on a community of supports. And I know Julie Wilson is going to address this in some of the work that they're doing, the wonderful work that they're doing up in Cook County. And again, understanding that current systems may not yet be set up very well for what's needed, especially given the unprecedented shifts that we have, not only in the number of older adults, but the number of people with disabilities in our society. And again, understanding that a person-centered, often that expert help, comprehensive, dynamic approaches, not a one and done or a one size fits all kind of approach is probably not going to serve as many people as we need to be serving. And then I have here on the screen that telling a different kind of success story. I love the word independent living. It means a lot. It's very important. I also love the terminology that we adopted in our name, vital living. I have to admit that as a mother of a young man who can never live independently, it is a term that the independent living is always something that I thought, how do I feel about this? I think there are people who live independently, but don't live vital lives. And of course, what we're looking for is vital living, right? So the stories of people living on their own independently are very important. I also think it's very important to tell success stories about what it means to live vital lives and what kind of supports, accommodations, technologies are needed for that. So I'm going to close just by putting up a picture. I'm not going to tell you a lot about this woman's success story, but I thought it was a nice way to hand this off to my colleagues. This is a woman that the Lighthouse has served. Her name is Louise. She is 92 years old. She is living alone with vision loss. We helped her get a personal emergency management system, which she is wearing across her neck, and get her set up so her family can check on her visually via an echo show. And really what we helped her with is not just the independence and the safety, but also being able to embrace the things that she still loves. Gardening. She is out in her garden. She likes to go out in her garden, and wanted the personal emergency management system so that she had a way to call for help if she needed it. She is reading in alternative ways, and she's able to call her friends with the echo show through audio. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sherry Cook, who the Lighthouse is very, very, very lucky to have on our staff. She is the head of our assistive technology division, which is actually our fastest growing division. We have a number of talented staff members, and she's going to talk about the power of assistive technology.
Thank you, Mary. Hello, I'm Sherry. And before I move on, I want to just give the federal definition of assistive technology. AT, assistive technology, is any item, piece of equipment, or product system, whether acquired commercially, off the shelf, modified, or customized, that will be used to increase, maintain, or improve functional capabilities of an individual with a disability. So I just wanted to go over that. So on this slide, I just want to go over assistive technology, and it can range anywhere from low tech to high tech. Really, even we can call it no tech. Where maybe somebody needs an expanded time for taking a test, or just putting some tissue paper over fluorescent lights for anxiety and seizure risk. So it could be anything from bump dots or markings for people in their homes, on their microwaves, so that they can have a tactile feed for where the power button is, or the 30-second button might be. Could be you can see a dressing stick. You can see some adaptive eating utensils. It could be something a little more higher tech, like different phone monitors, captel telephone, communication devices, are also known as AAC devices, different environmental controls, safety monitoring systems, and also, customized seating or mobility aids as well. A lot of time and energy goes into finding the right fit for people that need that customized seating. Environmental controls could be anything from, where a lot of us are using, Alexa or some other system for turning our lights on and off, maybe asking what the weather is. But you could even expand it more and, use it for pushing a power door opener, using some roller shades, a voice activated faucet for fill my glass half full. And it could be using a communication device for asking one of our echoes or other systems to do that. Low tech could be, again, anything like markings, aids for reminders and scheduling, adaptive cooking tools, adaptive games, bathing aids, and we'll go over that too in some of the home adaptation slides. And so, Mary, you could probably forward that. And so the home adaptations, that could be anything. That could be some lighting for underneath your bed, or cabinets, or on the stairs for people maybe with some low vision. Again, marking the stove or other appliances. It could be something a little higher tech, like automated shelving units in the kitchen or bathroom, that somebody could be able to reach what they need in the upper shelves. It could be a lift system in a home, an elevator in a home. We could be talking about thresholds inside or out. We could be talking about adaptive beds. We could be talking about expandable door hinges, or they can sometimes be called swing away, and that would add like the 2 inches needed for somebody to fit their wheelchair through their door. That would be the lower tech or cheaper alternative, or that person might need a pocket door or a sliding door in order to fit their wheelchair through, especially in our homes. Up in northern Minnesota, a lot of our homes are maybe older, built before the mid 70s, when the doorways can be quite narrow. It could be motion faucets, again, some of the powered environmental controls. It could be lower tech, again, like the chair or couch assist. If somebody's having a hard time getting in and out of their chair, there's many different devices to help with that. And home adaptations also kind of going in with the aging in place, or being able to age in place. And that could be anything from, I've been working with a family that is thinking ahead. This person is now a single parent due to a death, and 3 young adults with disabilities living in the home. And the mom has decided that she wanted to be proactive and make sure that the home was going to be accessible for her adult children to be able to stay in that home if something were to happen to her. And so very proactive, has already added a elevator in the home, has already went ahead and did some modifications, like roll-in showers, and wider doors if they were needed, railings, making sure that everything from getting into the home and moving around within the home is going to be accessible, and done an amazing job. And so then even it could be something coming home after a health crisis. So you see some pictures there of, the grab bars that are installed. This one has a sliding and then handheld shower head. You could see the shower chair there in the middle. That's a rehab shower chair. It could be a very basic, you just need a little shower stool or bench, or you may need something like the adaptive shower chair. It could be some type of a ramp, whether it's a temporary ramp that you need, or something a little more permanent. And again, looking at these things on the screen, that you do see, it really is important to call someone in to get an idea of, I've gone out to a few places where they're like, well, my neighbor borrowed me this scooter, and the person ended up calling because that scooter the neighbor borrowed or gave to that person ended up stalling out, and that person had to wait for quite a long time on a hot day for the wife to be able to come and get him, and couldn't figure out why the scooter, it wasn't very old. Why did it bow out on me? Well, the scooter was built for somebody that maybe weighed up to 150 pounds. It was a very lightweight scooter. And the person that was using the scooter was probably 300 plus pounds. And that scooter, certain scooters or certain devices are built specifically for a certain size person, or maybe somebody might need a rehab shower chair where they can recline back and not just a stool. So it's important, whether it's going home after a crisis, adapting your home for current medical condition or disability, or looking forward to the future, to call someone in that can help you with getting the devices that you would need, or that your loved one would need to be safe and you know, I'm always increasing safety and independence. And like Mary said too, you know, that vital living, that's very powerful. So we could probably move on to the next slide. Assistive technology for around the home. You know, I must say a lot of people are really looking at some kind of I call them my kitchen gadgets, and you see a couple pictures there of a rocker knife up on top, an adaptive spoon that has a cuff. Somebody may have a hard time grasping that spoon. You can see that it's bent. Some of these spoons or forks are bendable. And then, so there's many different types of adaptable utensils. It could look like the photo. It could be something that it's called the liftware level or the liftware steady, where it can help somebody with a tremor to stabilize and be able to get their food from their plate to their mouth. And it could be an adaptive cutting board. You can see that there's a shower chair. I was talking about and we saw the rehab shower chair. This is called a transfer shower chair. So it could be somebody could sit on the edge of that shower chair and then be able to kind of lift their legs up and over and scoot into the tub if they're not safely able to lift their leg up and over this tub. So you can advance the slide. There are many kind of different dressing tools as well. I briefly talked about the dressing stick. You can see how she's using it. You know, maybe she's got a bad shoulder. It also has a zipper pull at the end of it. And then you can see the button hook and zipper pull here in the middle. And then on the end, that's showing, that's like a hip replacement kit that you can get. And that will have a lot of the long handled, you know, sponges for bathing, different reacher, the dressing stick, the sock aid. So there are many different types of the lower tech daily living devices that are out there. And you can advance. GPS watches and alerting devices. These are things that I have noticed and have others as well as in my profession. Since COVID, it's been a little more difficult to acquire and keep support staff. And so these devices that are showed right here have actually become probably some of our most asked for devices. People might not be able to fulfill their 22 hours a day of PCA care. They may only get 2 hours a day. Or somebody may not have their PCA out in the community with them, but they want to be able to ride the bus. And so we have our personal response system up on the top, and we have, you know, the Apple Watch that people, some family members have been buying for people. We've been going out and doing training. So mom or dad, or maybe a young adult may have something like that. You know, the door sensors that will help if maybe they can't get PCA services to come in and the caregiver, the parent or the spouse is tired and wants to be able to sleep better at night. You can put one of those sensors on, and then so they can sleep better knowing that they're going to get alerted if that door opens, or there might be a mat underneath the bed. So they're going to be alerted if that there's motion or something touches that mat. So there's many different types of motion sensors, contact sensors that we do have in our lending library that we can go out and set up trials for. Also the GPS monitoring, that system you see, that watch on the bottom, that's amazing. We had one of our people were able to travel to visit a sister in California. For the first time. They hadn't done it because this person didn't have anyone to travel with them. And with using a device called AngelSense, it's not the one shown, but it's very similar. AngelSense device in the app we put on the adult group home, and then also back here in Duluth, and also the sister's phone. We put the app on there in California, and he traveled alone to California, and they knew where he was, when he landed, and they could communicate, and it was amazing. And through one of our grants, then we were able to get him that device for himself to keep. and another young man learning how to use the bus system here in Duluth, and one time did not see that his stop was there, missed it, and mom was frantically wondering where he was, and now she'll know. And he's using a device called a Gizmo watch, so it's a little bit different, but the same idea behind it. So you can move to the next slide. Smart home devices, they are another thing that we've been very busy with, going out and setting up trials, working with waivers, and even some grant funding to get these things, again, dropping in with the Alexa, making the calls hands-free, setting reminders, for medications or maybe appointments that are coming up. You see in the upper right, those are very easy to install for going over the light switches. Somebody can use with Alexa the smart plug on the bottom. And I want to try to speed it up, as I think we may be running out of time. The next slide is some of our some adaptive phones. Now we can go in and do some training on phones. There's some mainstream and specialized phones, if anyone has any questions on different phones or training, that is something that we do very often. And we do have many different phones in our lending library that we can get out for that training. And then our next slide, Mary, do you want me to cover this, or you?
I'll just repeat kind of what I said before, and if you want to chime in with anything else, assistive technology is not just about devices, and what Sherry does is so much more than that. I mean, it's always an individualized assessment, customized approaches, training, and then the ongoing support and troubleshooting, and often trialing something before people buy it via our device loan program. Anything else you want to add, Sherry?
Nope, you covered it. I would say just really please give us a call if you have any questions about assistive technology or what somebody may need in their home, work, or community, and we will be there to help you out.
Okay. I'll jump in on this too. What the question has come up about funding, and we'll talk more about this in the panel and at the end of our presentation as well, because obviously some of this technology is expensive, some of it's not. But I do want to get word out to everybody about a special opportunity that we have right now for what we're calling a Tech for Connectivity program. We can offer a lot of free technology devices and training and internet services to certain eligible populations. If the purpose is to connect to remote, like telehealth or other qualifying remote services. So just be aware of that. If you know somebody, the person has to be on medical assistance or a waiver, or currently using or accessing home and community-based services. It's a mouthful. Just call us if you have more questions. Even if somebody's not eligible for this program, there are a lot of other things that we can be doing, but I just wanted to put that plug in that this is a really enormous time limited opportunity. So if you know people who might qualify, please call us as soon as possible. And again, I think I mentioned the eligibility, so I'll just skip through that. And then happily introduce Laura, unless Sherry, there's anything else that you wanted to say?
No, just thank you for your time.
Okay. Laura Lusher is an occupational therapist and also our division director of the new occupational therapy division, new being several years old now, but I will also mention that she is one of the few people in the state and in the nation who has this specialty certification in low vision. So she is immensely qualified.
Great. Again, I'm Laura Lusher. Been at the Lighthouse for, I think, maybe 7. So I work as OT program director, but also as a treating officer. Like Sherry said, there's so many devices out there, and what we really try to do is work with a person and what's important to them. I consider myself a creative problem solver, an idea person, and a program planning. So when I go work with someone, I try to help them navigate, what's important to them, and then what is out there that's going to suit those needs for them. Because there's so much out there, which is amazing, but can be very overwhelming. I provide services remotely and at our center. I think there's benefits to all of the different ways to provide services. So in home, I can be on the spot, implement recommendations, look at their environment, and come up with ideas of how I can help or things that we can do. Remotely allows me to see my clients more frequently. So instead of driving up to Grand Marais every 2 weeks, maybe I see them once and then do a remote visit and then come see them again in person. And then at the center, it gives us the ability to run to the tech library and pull up devices on the spot and show people different ideas that we have. So,
I'm trying. I don't know why it gets stuck. Okay.
So something to consider, aging with disability versus aging into disability. We work with people no matter if they are aging with or into, but there's unique challenges and situations for both. Aging with disability, an example that I have is I have a client who has hearing loss, who has developmental disabilities. He's in his 60s now, and his mother is aging, and looking at the unique circumstances for him. How can he maintain his independence for how much help mom has still been providing in services? We've been working together and tried the smart home device so she can drop in, or he can call her and they can do video chat and have that instant connection, and just another level of being able to be connected. Aging into disability, there's many people are reluctant to service. They're reluctant to say they have a disability, and sometimes it's because they don't realize it. It's just a natural part of aging, and it's not that I have a disability, I'm just getting old and falling apart, or whatever they may be saying. But there's so much that we can still do to help people with what they want. You can go to the next one. Common things that I hear from my clients are that they're abandoning the valued activities that they're doing. So kind of that vital living piece of, there's so many things that they're like, oh, it's just not that important to do it anymore. But really it was a part of their identity and what brings them joy. Isolation, there's a lot of clients that are choosing not to go out because they're embarrassed of not being able to do what they used to do, or they can't recognize people's faces, so they're afraid that someone's going to be mad at them for not recognizing them. And then even that lack of access to events, transportation, knowing what's out there, things like that. And then the other area would be the increased reliance on others, not wanting to be a burden and wanting to maintain their independence. So kind of on both sides of that there. Next slide.
Get stuck. Yeah.
So I already shared the one story of my client with developmental delays. Another client has age-related eye disease, a recent heart attack. She's got pains that she uses. Oh, let's see. I'll switch this way a little bit to see if you can hear me better. And for her, she's still so active. She goes to her bridge club, she goes to her exercise group. And when talking about it, she says, what am I supposed to do? Just sit here and mope? I still have things I want to do. Working with her now, it's really a lot of connecting to different services that she didn't know was out there. I connected her to the National Library Service, so she's listening to books, and she decided that she's going to try to learn Spanish. So she's gotten the books on tape for learning Spanish. So aging and disability doesn't have to be engaged in it or living independently. so much that's out there. It's just a matter of problem solving it and being creative sometimes. Different things that I do. OT is kind of the world. We do so much, but in working with my clients, we really look at different training that I can do to promote them doing what they want to do, giving them the skills to do it in different ways. I'll go in and look at their make some recommendations, maybe on lighting and the setup of their environment, cooking and bathing. You know, there's so much that we can do. How we organize their house and manage their medications, looking at different options for financial management. That might be an enlarged checkbook, or it might be working. My one client uses their smart home device to do the math for their checkbook. They don't have to deal with the numbers as much. I do a lot of computer and phone training with what devices clients already have, or exploring new devices if their devices don't work for them anymore. But there's a lot of accessibility features built in that people aren't aware of. I've also had a couple of clients that, and while I'm working with them, they find out that they're going to have hip surgery or a knee, and I will help them look at the house and think about different considerations of how we might want to set things up, or devices that might be useful for them. And then I can even loan them those devices. I even helped somebody think through, after surgery, they were going to go to a short-term rehab setting, and we talked about some barriers that they might experience because of their vision loss and how to prepare for that going in. A big thing I do is resource connection. So I try to stay aware of what's out there and let people know what's possible, whether that be the TED program, state services for the blind, transportation, senior centers. I really try to help people know what's out there, because so many people just don't know what's possible. Okay, next one. This is just examples of the lighting and low vision stuff that I'll work with people on. And then we can go to the next one. Funding for services. You know, I'm an occupational therapist, so I can bill insurance, but we also have waivers that can help pay for my services and Sherry's. The STAR program for loaning devices for people, which is just huge to be able to try it before actually purchasing something. Versus for the blind and other grants and contracts that the Lighthouse has. So I always say, just get us connected with people and we can try to find a way to make it work, because we've got a lot of different options.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, that, you know, we do have a lot of grants right now. Some of them will fund devices for people who qualified, like I mentioned. Other grants, like under our Title III program, we are required to offer things on a cost share basis, a voluntary cost share. So if a person is eligible for the program just by virtue of being an older adult and they have these needs, then we actually can just ask them to pay what they think that they can pay. We would come up with a formula. It's say, this is what, you know, based on your income, this is what we think, the percentage that we think you could pay, so people understand the costs. But we don't deny service based on that. So it really depends on the situation. And like Laura said, the best thing to do is to call and start the process. And we, you know, sometimes Sherry in particular knows of a lot of grant programs that are out there for individuals to get access to things. So we are trying to do the best we can to access those resources. So don't assume that that a person would not be able to afford what they need. You know, there's very often a solution.
And that wraps up our presentation. So if anybody has any questions or people that they want to talk about, you can always just call us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for those presentations. It's really great to just see all of the options. I know I have heard some of this before, but every time I listen to you, I catch something new or learn about something new that's happening. So really great to hear that. And really, you guys run an amazing shop. We have been working somewhat with the Tech for Connectivity grant, and I really encourage folks to check that out because there's so much that is there that can help people. So really appreciate that. And with that, I would like to hand it over to Julie Wilson. Julie Wilson is the Executive Director of Care Partners of Cook County in northeastern Minnesota. Julie has over 13 years of experience in the aging field and has over 20 years in management. She grew up on a farm in northwestern Minnesota and has lived and worked in the aging field in the Twin Cities, Bismarck, North Dakota, and now Cook County in northeast Minnesota. Thank you for joining us, Julie.
Thanks for having me. It's wonderful to be here. Well, I also am going to do a share screen here, get my PowerPoint up for you. All right, I think we're in business. Yeah? All right, thanks, Georgia. Well, I just want to say with Georgia, I really had the same sentiment. We're super grateful to have been able to participate with this amazing group of people. Mary and your team, you just do remarkable work. And again, knowing some of these things exist, it is so important for us to hear it over and over again, isn't it? To just be reminded of the services that are available to us. It's extraordinary. Again, I'm Julie Wilson. I'm with Care Partners of Cook County. So I think everybody's familiar with where Cook County is, but we are way up in that farthest corner of the arrowhead along Lake Superior there. And, you know, many of you may have been up there traveling if you know, I have some familiarity in that regard. But I'm with Care Partners of Cook County, and just briefly, we serve folks 60 plus. We're a volunteer-based organization. So we do, our staff does care coordination, including end of life. We do caregiver consultation. We have volunteer companions, end of life companions. We have end of life doulas that work with folks. We do senior rides, chores. We provide education for the community, advocacy, just awareness around living well, aging well, and dying well in Cook County. We've got a memory cafe for folks with disabilities. And then we also have Death Cafe that's led by our death doulas, end of life doulas. So a lot of wonderful things. We're just always looking for how we can serve the community there best. So I just want to kind of hone in on the rural experience of some of these things that Mary certainly touched on in her introductory presentation. And I like to refer to some of what we experience in Cook County, and I'm sure other rural communities as well, as a caricature of challenges, the challenges that everybody's facing right now, a lot of these things. But it's a little bit of that exaggeration sometimes in rural communities. And, you know, we've all been to a fair or something, right, where you have a caricature, and you know, if you've got high cheekbones, they might be exaggerated high cheekbones, or, you know, big hair for me, right? My hair gets exaggerated. So just a lot, it's kind of that idea that some of the things that we're challenged with in the even urban settings and our cities are exaggerated challenges when we get into our rural and somewhat isolated and remote areas. So just a couple of these things. Again, Mary touched on some of this too, but particular to Cook County, you know, I'll speak from that lens moving forward here. Limited healthcare professional services. And so when I say that, you know, we've got service providers that provide home care and in-home support for various things, but they are struggling with workforce issues. So it's often something that's got a 6-month waiting list, or it takes some time to access these, or it might be that they're sometimes having to triage where they can provide service. So that's something that we're struggling with. There is no assisted living in all of Cook County. So maybe I can take a moment, you know, for those that aren't familiar, Cook County starts about Schroeder, goes up to the Canadian border. So kind of goes through Schroeder, Tofty, Lutsen, Grand Marais, Hoveland, up to Grand Portage, and of course up the Gunflint. So that is kind of the area that we're serving with Care Partners. So there is no assisted living in our county entirely. So that's an option for folks that want to stay in their community but need a little bit of that support or would prefer to be able to be in that environment, that's not an option to stay in their community to be able to go to an assisted living. We do have a nursing home in Grand Marais. That is the only nursing home in Cook County. And, you know, they have again been faced with some of the challenges of workforce. And so there were many, many months where there was no admissions at all. So folks were often needing to leave their community to get services. Sorry, I get choked up when I say those things even. And then, of course, I've been alluding to this, but really the real caricature is around of the challenges is really around workforce and the housing crisis that we're experiencing. So I say here affordable housing, but in fact, it's housing generally for anybody really to just find housing. And I'll talk a little bit more about some scenarios on that later. Transportation is impacted by the workforce shortage. We have had a partner that provided transportation from, from Grand Marais and Grand Portage and the communities in Cook County to Duluth. And because of workforce shortages and driver shortages, that has not been available for folks. And so folks, when you live in Cook County, there's some services that while we have a hospital and clinic in Grand Marais, there's many health services that are needed, our folks need to get to Duluth for. And then, even things like some of the shopping needs that people have, they need to get to Duluth. So that transportation is currently not available. So Care Partners, one of the things we've done is we provide a gap service for folks that are 60 and older for medical services. So we do provide transportation if for older adults that need to get to Duluth for medical appointments. The caveat of that is it is a volunteer-based service. So people are using their personal cars. Yay, volunteers. I mean, we have extraordinary volunteers, but they're using their own personal vehicles to transport people. So not able we're not able to assist people in this at this time that have that have challenges in their abilities to, they may need to be using a wheelchair or what have you, or need more assistance to get transferred. And many of our volunteers are older adults themselves. And so we really have to have where folks are able to get into the car themselves with just a kind of standby or a gentle assist. So those are challenges. And again, I'll continue to speak to the geographical isolation and remoteness that is experienced, that folks experience. It's just the beauty of why we love where we live is also the challenge of where we live. And then the aging population demographic in Cook County, to give you a sense, this is from the US Census. It's a nice visual, so I share this one. It's from 2019, but you can see Cook County is the second county, as the highest county of percentage of folks 65 and older. So here it's stated as 27%. We know from the Minnesota Compass that that is now nearing 29% and is anticipated to continue to increase over the coming years. So, that's nearing 1 in 3 people is 65 and older. So it is again, not that everybody older has disabilities, but it certainly speaks to the potential needs that our county is facing, already is facing. And just a couple of examples. There's so many, right? We all could share so many stories of people, but an example from the perspective of our geographic situation for folks that don't live here and aren't familiar with this community as much, that the travel for urgent care, we had a gal, we'll call her Phyllis, and she was in need of urgent care, not necessarily emergency care, but urgent care to take care of an issue that she was having, and contacted our hospital and clinic in Grand Marais and was encouraged to head straight for Duluth. So a sense, to give you a sense of this person's, what they had to do to get to urgent care. Thankfully, they had the capacity to get, to have somebody to drive them, but they were at the end of the Gunflint. They lived at the end of the Gunflint Trail. And so it's 1 hour drive to Grand Marais and then 2 hours beyond to Duluth. So it's a significant amount of travel that folks go through to get to urgent care in some scenarios. So another scenario is the housing issues. Again, this is an extreme caricature, exaggerated issues, but there is just a lot of need for housing. We have folks that, more recently when we had the Christmas storm this year in 2022, we became aware of some of the ways in which people were living in the circumstances they were living in their housing. And it highlighted some of that, right? Because they had some issues and people weren't reporting these types of issues of management or how these apartments were and things they were experiencing, because there's nowhere to go and they don't want to leave their community. So just some of the things that impact the service provision is I just wanted to point those out. Having said that, the strengths of this community of Cook County, and again, many of you, if you're at other rural areas, you can say a hearty amen to the strengths of folks in rural communities, the resilience to a lot of, there's just a real sense of resilience and ability to meet the challenges. The collaboration, I can't say enough about the extraordinary collaboration that happens in Cook County, particularly before COVID started, and really grateful for this, is really started to begin this aging coalition process with the Northland Foundation funding and support, and certainly our Quad A's and just so much support, but the collaboration of our aging service providers, our public health, our businesses, the art community, just really this creative collaboration on how we can meet needs in creative ways, right? And I just also want to acknowledge this concept of placemaking. So some of you might be familiar with this. Placemaking is often used as a term that talks about after there's been a tornado or a tsunami or a community has been destroyed or had some significant damage. It's the building up again, right? But I think in a broader sense that, it just speaks to this why we live where we live and why we love where we live, this sense of place that people have. So I think this is a really big thing for us in Cook County is there's a real sense of community and commitment to this place that is home for folks that live there, a real sense of belonging. And so a part of what we feel is a creative thing that we want to do is really work with these strengths, right? Is facilitating and helping make connections and form some new social networks and connections for folks along this wave so that they can stay in that space that they love. Some of the solutions and opportunities, again, is really, and again, this is, I just want to step back and this is kind of in the lens of the lack of professional services, right? So kind of share that with you. And so just how it is that we can help really empower folks to stay engaged, to live well, age well, and die well in Cook County. So really empowering and nurturing organic supports that exist. So what I mean by that is, that the folks is really identifying the people, our neighbors, our connections that we have that can help us, that are organic, that are just really homegrown, part of our community, right? How do we reach out to that? How do we identify that? And so that's really something that we've been working on. And we're using a tool, we're starting to use a tool called Ego Mapping. It's a really kind of that person-centered mapping of these social supports. And so we're doing a seminar and workshop in Grand Marais on the 25th of March around this concept, but really wanting it to be something people take the time to look at, right? So whether you're at this time of more of a need or crisis where you're you're an older adult who needs services and is struggling to find professional supports, we can utilize this snapshot in time to kind of capture what are the supports. Sometimes it's asking them the question of, who are people that have offered to help you in the past, right? Because sometimes we all know we've been through grief, loss, various things in our lives where we know people offer to help, and we often don't ask, right? That's always the hard part. And so really just helping people identify who are those people. And this is just, example. Eco maps can kind of take on all kinds of forms, but the idea is that the person is the center. In this case, it's showing a family, but really the individual is the center of this, and kind of looking at who are your supports. What are your supports? It might be housing, might be that you own your home. That might be a strength that you have. So some of the strengths and some of the supports that you have are people, and some of it is also just financial. We've got a clinic here. I have a good doctor. I have a good relationship with my doctor. Just kind of identifying those things, and then taking the time to empower and nurture, like where are there holes or gaps. And really, we're just really in our community wanting to be encouraging folks to be doing this type of work early, at any age really, but ideally that it helps us to live well, right? Kind of self-assess, who are my supports and where are my risk areas? Where are my potentials? And helping to kind of just identify that with folks and walk through that journey, because the goal really, again, is to really help people live well, age well, and die well in Cook County. We want them to be able to stay in their homes. So that's the eco mapping concept. And then also working towards community awareness is helping people to know how they can help, giving them opportunities through education and promotional ideas, but really helping businesses and other partners and collaborators in the community to know. And then just community members, neighbors, how can I help? What's a practical things that I do? Perhaps even, after a loss or in grief, helping people know what's helpful, helping people identify in themselves what's helpful for me. So just that kind of bridging those gaps on that, so we can develop more and more organic supports as we, of course, as a community, try to address the larger issues. But certainly at Care Partners and with our collaborators, we're just really also working on how we can continue to be creative on some of these issues, organic solutions. Again, creative collaboration, age-friendly communities. We're really loving delving into this, and just sometimes that collaboration comes in creative spaces, right? And in Grand Marais, we've got a vibrant art community, and so really tapping into that. How does that impact living well, aging well, and dying well? How can we engage with them? So just always thinking about the assets and strengths of your community. And then conscious aging is, again, just ensuring we're working to build in people at all ages, but certainly, when you're retirees and when you're at those ages where you're looking to want to continue to live well and age well and die well. So intentional engagement, a sense of purpose, and then physical and mental activity. And that's just kind of a really quick, I really wanted to share this from the lens of the importance of developing and finding creative ways to do organic supports in the rural community. That is really essential, and it's also native and natural to our folks to take care of their neighbors and take care of each other. So to really kind of promote that and work with that is a wonderful thing that we find as a strength in the rural communities. Thank you. Actually, Eric, if you want to stop the share, that would be great.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Julie. I, again, am amazed with how much innovation and creativity and really grit that happens in small communities. When when you only have each other, amazing things happen. So kudos to you. And I know that stuff like that is happening throughout the region and throughout the state. So it's really fun to get to highlight you today. So we are going to shift now into our panel presentation. This is where our conversation comes in. I am really excited to see we've got some great questions that are already coming through in the Q&A. If you have been sitting here and taking some notes and listening and had some questions or comments pop up, please do feel free to plug them in. So we have our panelists again here, our folks from Lighthouse, as well as Julie from Care Partners in Cook County. And I'm actually going to start with a question here. Let me see if I can find it. Regarding snowstorms, we aren't quite out of the woods yet. We're bound to have a few more. So let's talk snow. Thinking about significant snowstorms or really any other disaster or emergency, how can people living with disabilities and caregivers prepare and plan, and what response and recovery resources are available that we can either learn about or help promote to the folks that we're working with? And I open this up to anyone who wants to raise their hand or dive in.
I have a couple ideas just on a basic level. Having, thinking through and having things on hand for if something like a power outage happens. I have a client that has a charger box that it's like a battery charged backup plugged in underneath her dining room table. So that way if the power goes out, it's got a flashlight built into it. It's got the extra charge, just some things so that way still be able to have light, still be able to charge the cell phone if you have one for some of those communication things. And even just thinking through what's happened in the past or what's possible if the power goes out or if you're not connected, you have some of those emergency supplies in place and things.
Great, thanks, Laura. Anyone else want to reply to that?
Well, I guess I would just add, and this is in particular to Cook County, is Andrea Orest at our public health has been doing Healthy Homes Initiative. So there is some funding, but she can kind of assess, and along the lines with what Laura is saying. I mean, it's everything from the, trying to help with energy costs, right? Weather stripping, replacement, connecting them to those connections in dollars. Are they prepared? Is there safe backups and then also this concept, I think, again, it's a good example of the eco mapping piece in Minnesota is one of those things is weather and how prepared am I and who are my social supports. And sometimes even if you can't use it, like we had a client who bought a little snowblower, can't use it, but at least if I can find someone to do it, I have it. So, it's just creative. It really is a lot of creative connections being made.
Great, thanks. I think we have a couple resources coming through in the chat. The Ready North Network, which has great resources. And then I plugged one in. AARP has got a great resource guide. And then that link will also connect you to a link from FEMA with some resource guides. But I think, like with anything, the trick is to get people thinking about it, right? How do we plan versus react when the crisis happens? And so I think these are good spaces to have this dialogue. Any other input on that question specifically?
Yeah, I would just add to, I think this really feeds into what Julie was talking about, is that, a lot of times people are embarrassed to say they don't have a support network. And they can't, so my first response was, they got to plan ahead. If the snowstorm is coming, you do this, and this, to make sure that somebody will check on you, but sometimes you don't have somebody to call. So it needs to start a lot, far before that snowstorm or flood or whatever is coming, so that you have somebody to call. And, that's really hard. And, this question really hits me because, as I mentioned, I have a son with significant severe disabilities, and I did live in Cook County. And also, even in Duluth, and there was a time when there was a snowstorm coming in Duluth, and I knew my husband was that winter living out in Oregon, had taken a job out there, and we were kind of in transition and getting ready to move out there. But I was alone with my very disabled son and a 3-year-old. And so I had caregivers for my son, but I knew they wouldn't be able to get to me. So we literally packed up and went to stay somewhere else, and we were able to do that because we were able to pay for a hotel. But it's really hard to be in that position. And, a lot of people don't have the money, or they don't have a paid staff member who could come, and it's dangerous. It really is. So it's a really good question, and it hits at my heart. Thank you for that question.
Great. Thanks. All right, I'm gonna go up to the top for actually our first question that came in the Q&A. Are there any recommendations on how family members can create bank accounts and reduce liabilities for adults with disabilities who are in and out of treatment facilities?
I don't have a recommendation, but I do know, I've worked with a client who even just trying to figure out getting multiple people on accounts and not give the control of the account. Really difficult. So no answer, but they do recognize the need there.
This is Sherry with the Lighthouse, and I don't know if this is helpful, but I know Disability Hub, you can instant chat or call them and kind of give them your scenario, and they can assist with giving you resources or ideas for setting up any kind of accounts or anything like that, that may or may not affect somebody's benefits or services.
Okay. Great, thanks. And I see that that's in the chat there. I'm going to dovetail on this question. It was one that was in there that Mary said we will discuss. It's regarding affordability and how can people afford assistive technology devices and adaptations? Is it covered under Medicare, private pay, supplements, grants? What is the compilation or variety of funding sources that are available?
Yeah, I'll jump in and then let my colleagues. I think that the biggest answer, like I started to say before, is it really depends. So, wheelchairs might be paid for under your medical insurance. If you're on a waiver, you might be able to get your social worker to pay for things. There might be device loans through our loan library. There might be grants that we have to be able to pay for things. Sometimes the answer is no, we can't help with funding for that, but a lot of times the answer is yes. So, it's start by making the call and we'll figure that out, because it's just too complicated to try to give formulas of what is or is not covered. And it, to some extent, it depends on where we are in our grant funding cycles too.
Great. Thanks. Any other question or responses to that from Lighthouse team?
Depending on the cost of this too, I'll talk with clients and say, is your birthday coming up, or is it Christmas? Like, sometimes there's families connected who are looking for a good device to purchase for their loved one. So it's the creativity piece of, let's look at everything that we can find that's out there for resources and connections and what the Lighthouse has. And let's look at your network and your people that would be willing to help.
Laura, those organic supports, right? Love that, identifying those.
And this is Sherry with the Lighthouse. So there could be also, we do not at the Lighthouse have a certain grant funding, the person's waiver, maybe they can't purchase something or funds are not there at the time. There may be other funds throughout the state of Minnesota that I could do a search for, depending on what the service or device is. So it's always worth a phone call anyway to ask.
Would you guys, again, you are the experts here, but would you say that to some degree, most importantly, it's letting professionals advocate for you and do some of this work, because I think a lot of people don't want to reach out, and they try to call their insurance company and get turned down. Maybe they didn't ask the question right. Maybe they didn't go through their doctor, that just the importance of allowing people that are really skilled like you guys to advocate on behalf and research. It's even the approach of asking, right, is a difference maker for folks. So.
And I think it's, I don't know the word, but there's so many people that don't even know certain things are possible. It can be a very low cost device. A bump dot can make all the difference for someone. And that's just a sticker that we put on their microwave. So people not knowing what to even, or that whole like aging into disability and not thinking of themselves as having a disability or qualifying for support. It's starting the conversations, and sometimes there's things that we can do that it's not so much the funding, but just knowing that it's there.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I really agree with that, Laura. But surprisingly, it's less often an issue than we might think. For instance, with our program that we have through Title III, our cost share, and this is people voluntarily contribute, our cost share more than pays for the cost of the devices that we're providing for people. It's not enough to pay for all of our staff time, but you think about that, that's a lot. I mean, I've been amazed how much people are saying, yeah, I can afford that. So either we're able to find a funding source, or people really recognize the value. And like Laura said, it's often not as expensive as you think. I mean, an Echo Show is not that expensive, and it's profoundly life-changing in terms of how much it can connect people to being able to access information, and family members being able to drop in. So, a lot of times it's just knowing what that solution is, and finding what that is. Doesn't mean it's always the case, but it usually works.
Right. Yeah. It's just that networking piece, and getting creative and putting your heads together. So great. Well, thanks. Well, I'm going to shift gears a little bit to our next question from Judy. Interested in learning more about the Death Cafe, and wondering if that's open only to Cook County folks, and is it live or is it on Zoom? Kind of how do you connect folks to it, and is it open? And then do you know, I guess, of any other similar services that might be throughout the region?
Yeah, I love that someone asked about that. So the Death Cafe is an international concept. You can go to deathcafe.com, I think is the website. But yeah, there's a lot of Zoom Death Cafes. And if you go once, go again. Don't judge a Death Cafe by your first experience, because they're totally, I'm loving the word organic today, but they're totally homegrown. Every time you go to a Death Cafe, sometimes you might have people there that are acutely grieving, and it feels like I've had this experience. It feels like you stepped into, maybe I don't belong here, I'm not acutely grieving. I was just wanting to kind of talk about death and the normalizing of this thing we're so scared to talk about, right? But sometimes, so it's always different. It depends on who shows up, and the community, the particular group that's gathering, what their needs are. So it's responsive, but it really is intended to be a space to normalize this thing that it happens to all of us that we don't talk about, right? And to kind of prepare in creative ways, open the conversation around legacy, and living well and dying well. So yeah, they're available all over. The one in Cook County has been Zoom, actually, until just recently. It's back in person, but we're continuing to have conversations on the Death Doula group, and in Cook County is really open to trying to make that as accessible as possible. So likely we will have some Zoom options in the future too. But there's lots of Zoom options online.
Great. Thanks, Julie. I'm going to add a follow-up question on that. A lot of people haven't heard of the concept of a death doula. Mm-hmm. Can you do a very quick overview on it? Because it's such an innovative and cool thing that has been popping up here and there.
I'm going to try my best to do them justice. It's you hear about them as death doulas and also end of life doulas, and both are scary for different reasons to a lot of people, right? But you know, it's the best way to kind of envision it is I think a lot of us are becoming very familiar with the concept of a birth doula, right? And so it's the same concept. It's the beautiful natural thing of a baby coming into the world, and the death doula, the doulas, they're by name, I think. You know, they're present. They do vigils. They're present with folks that are journeying beyond this life, but they are also part of that, thinking about that sooner, right? Really trying to normalize death and thinking about that scope of living well, aging well, dying well. You know, just that it's not just about this moment in time when you're dying, we're going to do vigil, but really kind of helping you think about legacy work is a big key and piece of the death doula work also. So it's really beautiful. And you know, we have people that are masseuse, you know, they're massage therapists, and they provide that beautiful gift to folks at the end of life. We have folks that are musical, that we have folks that are, you know, there's different skill sets that people bring to this work, to poetry, and it depends on the individual they're working with. Super person-centered work. It's just lovely. And of course, in Cook County, that's part of Care Partners, and it's we also have a lot of volunteers that want to do that kind of work. So they work with the death doulas on vigil and end of life support, and really individualized for the person. That's what it's all about. It's beautiful.
Great, thanks. There was a quick comment that looks like there's some work happening in Duluth, potentially a webinar in March. And then I also, off the top of my head, know that there are death doulas in Aiken County. So it's really kind of cool to see that new concept popping up here. So great. All right, I'm going to switch to our next question. In your area of expertise, how do you customize care solutions or technology solutions to meet someone's specific needs? Or how do you adapt care solutions to the individual rather than a one-size-fits-all?
This is Sherry with the Lighthouse. So that is a really good question. What you really need to do is meet with the person and see in their environment, find out what they want to improve as far as safety and independence within their home, community, or workplace, or education, and see what kind of a device or adaptation or modification may be able or present to do that. Doing the trials and setting up device trials is extremely important, and also being able to be honest, the professional coming into the home, going into the home or workplace, being honest about what they feel comfortable doing, because it's the person that we want to have the best outcome. And so making sure we know when to pull somebody else in. Like, I'm super fortunate where I am. I have occupational therapists I can call in. We have orientation mobility people we can call in, and we utilize our whole team. And I also have been able to call in if somebody needs something. We can call in somebody if they need a speech language pathologist or whatever, and I coordinate that, and we call in other professionals to make sure that this person is getting the best of everything, no matter who we have to call in or what we have to research. Just, and nothing is a one size fits all. That's when things could go wrong. So being really careful with really listening and paying attention and observing with what the need or concern was in the first place when you talk to that person.
Yeah, I'll piggyback on that, Sherry. Exactly. There's so much discussion that we have with our clients at first to really see, just because all these things are out there doesn't mean that a person needs all of them, and especially that they don't need all of them introduced at one time. So if we're going to come in like, we're going to set up all of your lights and we're going to have a new ramp installed, and it can be too much at once. So kind of trying to appreciate the all in good time of what's most important to you and for your safety. What can I show you? I might know of 50 different options of how we're going to get there, but let's think about what's most realistic in this circumstance. And a lot of time, going to Sherry or to other professionals and saying, what's worked for you, or I'm thinking about this device, what do you think of this alarm clock versus this one? To try to funnel it down to less overwhelming choices in what we're working on with our clients, and really come with just some of the things that we think are going to work best for them versus.
Can
Great.
I just piggyback
Yeah, go for
something,
it.
Georgia?
Yeah, please do.
I'm just curious what you guys' experiences are on, and I'm sure when you're going in that concept of recognizing the strengths that they have, that each individual client has and brings to developing a plan for them.
Well, this is Sherry. So, like say, for example, if we were to go in and somebody's talking about how they would like to access their portal for their health, like whatever clinic that they go to, but they maybe they're low vision, so they need a larger screen. They do have a smartphone. Well, if they have an Apple product, then we're probably going to go to an iPad, and if they have an Android, we'd probably stick with Android tablet instead of crossing over and going into a different platform and teaching a whole new thing. We're just going to bring in a larger screen, and then show them some of the accessibility features that are built into that device of something that they are already using. So we do ask them, what are you using currently, or what have you used in the past that worked or didn't work? And then we kind of build from there.
And then part of the initial discussions, getting a feel for a person, are they a techie person, or are they like, I want nothing to do with internet or technology, and feeling that out and trying to find approaches that'll match what they're interested in. And then sometimes just showing like, oh, did you know that there's this device out there? Because it may have sounded overwhelming, but when you try it, we can keep it down to a more simple approach. Starting off with just saying, hey, smart home device, what time is it? And not jumping into the whole environmental controls with it. And then kind of slowly building upon what they're feeling confident and comfortable with.
That's awesome. I think you guys just answered the next question, which is how do you balance providing tools to individuals without overwhelming them? So I think you covered that, but anything else you want to add on that?
Sometimes on my first day, I'll say, it might be sounding overwhelming for all the things that we're talking about for possibilities, but I promise we're going to break it down into smaller, manageable steps and take it one thing at a time and provide resources and training. I'm not just going to throw something at you and walk away.
Right. Great.
If I can just add to, I see, clients that the Lighthouse has served for years, and the cases might open and close, but they, these guys are so wonderful about establishing relationships. People know that they can call back, and, and they also, our professionals call and check up too. So if something's not working, hopefully we know it and we take a different approach. And the world is dynamic. People's needs change too. So we want to open the door that, maybe somebody calls because they just want a magnifier. And we get that a lot. We get a lot of requests for devices. They think, okay, if I can just get a device, then I can see better. You just start with that goal that they're willing to take. And you plant a seed that, well, we can train and do all these other kinds of things. And what I see is our professionals are establishing the relationships, and then the clients are coming back and willing to ask for more, which is just so important. So again, that one and done is just, we really try to avoid it. Sometimes it happens, sometimes that's all somebody wants, and you don't ever hear from them again. But most of the time I see a long-term relationship.
I think it's interesting because not only do people's needs change, but the technology changes so fast.
Mm-hmm.
So even a bigger kudos and pat on the back to you guys. And, how do you stay up to date with it, right? Is it something that you're constantly trying to stay on top of and just networking? Or, is that your biggest strategy, or how do you guys stay on top of it?
Yeah, this is Sherry. So it is it is always changing, and it is a constant we attend a lot of trainings and webinars ourselves, and we have different vendors of devices that actually will train with us, and we just kind of like play with the devices too, to make sure that we keep up to date with everything that's changing, or different features that are option maybe on a current, but with the software update now we can do such and such. So we just try to stay current with those things.
Yeah, attending conferences and seeing what they have out on the tables, or I'm just kind of a lover of learning. So researching what's out there and kind of going down the rabbit hole sometimes of like, oh wow, I didn't know this was a thing, and then trying that out, or and then definitely sharing our knowledge between each other to say like, I found this new device and here's how I'm using it with this client, even though it's not what it was made for. And then like, oh, I'm gonna try that again next time, or with somebody else. So lots of work and communication.
And as we grow, we're trying to divide and conquer more too, because you know, Sherry and Laura can't be experts in absolutely everything, although they come pretty darn close. You know, so you know, if we have 5 technology staff and 2 occupational therapists, and you know, 2 highly certified blindness instructors, you know, they all bring different areas that they kind of gravitate to, and they may stay up to date on some of those areas more in depth than others, and kind of relieve everybody of having to know everything. So the multidisciplinary approach is really powerful too in that.
Great.
Isn't that the truth for all of us, really, right? We don't all have to know everything. We just need to be resourceful, collaborate, more people. I'm glad to get to reacquainted with all of you.
So true. So true. All right. We have about just a few minutes left here for our panel discussion. It's gone really quick. So I think we'll see if we've time for 2 or 1 questions, but the next question is being mindful of our language. What inclusive language can we use discussing these issues that promotes people-centered perspectives rather than problem-centered perspectives, and avoiding labeling language? So what are your tips for that?
I love that question. And it is something, you know, when we hire staff at the Lighthouse, we start with a language training, and it's person first language, you know, a person with a disability, a person who uses a wheelchair, not somebody who is in a wheelchair or confined to a wheelchair. You know, it's definitely not a retarded person. You know, so there's some basic, you know, you can get articles. Katie Snow, the person first language is a great starting place for that. But I think it goes beyond language, goes beyond that too. It's about what I was alluding to before, that you know, what does their success story look like? And oh, well, that person became disabled and then they couldn't live, and you know, they couldn't do this, and you know, it's just listen to what we're starting to say, you know, and think of reframing that a little bit and tell success stories in a different way. You know, having a disability is not the end of the world. People live really vibrant, rich lives with disabilities. And I think those stories need to be told a lot more often. And I saw a question of that too. And you know, how do you tell people about the possibilities, so that you know their possibilities are as diverse as every individual stories? But I think we need to be more willing to start to tell those stories, and reframe how people think about, you know, what it means to live with a disability. You know, because otherwise it's getting the disability and going off to the assisted living is kind of the end of the story, and that's not the story, how we want to be telling the stories, right?
Narrative. What's the narrative? Yeah.
Yeah,
Mary,
I love.
Oh,
Go ahead, Julie.
I just wanted to say, Mary, you said during your, and you kind of referenced that now here too, but you said during your talk, the lack of awareness of possibilities. And I just wrote that down. I love that, right? Just the lack of awareness of possibilities. And isn't that what we're all trying to do, is help people make be aware of the possibilities and connections and connect them.
You know, and I'm not trying to fault anyone, but it's we really don't know. I mean, even professionals in the field who work in the field, the disability field, don't a lot of times don't know that yes, this person can do this. You know, again, I go back to my own examples, but you know, when my son was first finding out about augmentative communication, we had wonderful professionals who were saying yes, he can do this, and we had other people who said, nah, this isn't going to work. So, you know, sometimes you have to have that vision. And you know, my mom has dementia and vision loss, and you know, trying to get her to believe that she can do more things is really difficult too. You know, I don't have a great formula for it, except just we need to keep talking, you know, and reading about it, you know, reading about it, people who are doing different things. We try to write up success stories at the Lighthouse so that we can be sending them out with our thank you letters, and also so that, you know, if somebody comes in, you have, well, oh yes, you can do this. Let me tell you about, you know, so and so. You know, we helped, and this is what they're doing right now, and here's a photo. You know, like the woman in the garden. You know, who would have thought that a woman with significant vision loss could live alone at 92 and be gardening, you know, every day all summer long, right?
Great. Thanks. Those are really inspirational stories. And we could go on for forever, but I do see that we are getting close to the end of our time here. So I appreciate all the questions that came through in the chat. It looks like folks are wanting to network a little bit more, so that's wonderful. We will be sending all of this information out, as well as our contact information if you want to get in touch with any of the panelists here. And so just really excited. I hope that this sparks something for you in terms of your own work life, your own professional life. And one of my takeaways is just the central point that networking plays. We all know each other, and it's easy for us to get stuck in our daily work and our daily rhythms, and needing the other organizations, our other community members, having folks with disabilities at the table to learn about their experience, having older adults at the table to have those voices right there is just so important. So just really, I guess my call to action for myself personally is really keeping the eyes out for what else is going on, and reaching out and networking with folks. So for you know, for everyone, just think, you know, our call to action is to really think about how we can support people with living with disabilities and their caregivers. You know, how do we think about what is our own sphere of influence? Are we being inclusive? This whole diversity and aging series has been about, you know, making sure that we're not othering. I think Mary said that early on in her presentation. And so what does that mean for all of us in our own lives? So we are all responsible for understanding diversity in all of its forms. And so just having this space today, thank you for taking this space and time today to attend this webinar or listen to it if you are doing so later, to think about how we can be inclusive for everyone. And with that, I am going to pass it over to Rebecca to do our final housekeeping pieces.
Wow, what an incredible event. Thank you so much, Georgia. Thank you to all of our presenters. Thank you to our ASL interpreters, and the amazing discussion, the learning that has happened, and the resource sharing. We will be, like I said earlier, we will be sending out the recording. We will also share speaker bios with everyone so that you can see all of our speakers and learn more about them, resources to links. We ask that if you have just a few moments, it helps us so much to make this series as good as it can be. I put a survey link in the chat, so we'll also send that through email after the event as well. But we ask that you just take a few moments to go ahead and fill out that survey. I also lastly just want to say thank you so much to our collaborative partners.